Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Today, Tim and I are talking about generational curses or generational trauma, however you want to think of it. But this came out of two shows that we have watched and are watching still. The Bear that we love, and
Good show.
and Monsters about the Menendez, Lyle and Eric Menendez on Netflix. I'm sure a lot of you are watching it as well, and many of you know about the Bear. So those are two stories about generational trauma, generational abuse, and what happens when we don't work on our issues through families. To put it bluntly, how messed up our lives can be when the people ahead of us who come before us don't deal with the traumas in their lives. So, this is a more serious topic today, but one that I think is really important and one that I talk about quite a bit on the therapy side of my practice. I don't talk about this so much with the coaching clients because it's not appropriate for coaching. But this is something that I've talked about for decades, and really, I really enjoy this deep dive with my clients who come to me and want to do this work in healing themselves, and the deep dive that is required for many, many people to do better, to think better, to feel differently. You got to do this work.
Yeah. So the Bear, that particular show, there's an entertainment part to that,
Right.
and it's well written and it's interesting.
It's food, it's cooking, it's family dynamics, which
kitchen dynamics.
They're like a family in and of themselves. But you got Carmi and Richie and their cousins, and the brother, forget his name, who ended his life, and then Sugar, the sister. It's all these family members. They're all family. There's so many cousins. And I think one of the reasons why that show has done so well is because it's a very relatable show. We all, to some degree, can relate to that dysfunction, and in this case, with that family, pathology.
Yeah.
But we've all got it.
Yeah.
If we don't have it, we know someone who's got it. But I would dare say that we've all got dysfunction. There's no family that doesn't have it. And the Bear is so attractive to people because it's not about violence. It's just everyday relatable stuff. And absolutely, Tim, those writers are fantastic.
Yeah.
You can relate to it.
You can totally relate to it.
Right.
And I think in contrast, Monster, I didn't really.
You didn't remember? I remember this. The 90s, this Menendez trial. I remember it well.
Yeah, I don't remember it well. I remember it.
I think it was right after.
Vaguely.
Right, but it was before OJ, before the OJ Simpson, because OJ Simpson happened in 94, right? The white Bronco. This happened in 89, 90, 91.
Yeah.
The murders were in 89.
This was first.
Yeah.
But this one is not for the faint of heart. This show, it gets your attention, but it's got you. There's no entertainment factor here. This one is
it's intrigue.
Yeah. And you also know that, there's a little bit of a Hollywood twist to this, right? There's always a little spice up.
Yeah.
But even with that, it's unbelievable how deep this one goes. And it makes you really think.
You're not from my field, right? You're not from the psychology, mental health background. Are you curious?
Curious
about Eric and Lyle.
I'm curious to know the actual truth. Yes.
Yeah.
We're not, I don't know how many episodes. I think there's 9, and I think we're maybe on 5 or 6, something like that. Yeah. So we're still kind of finding.
And there's a documentary out today actually on that. There's another one.
Okay.
This is a series. There's a documentary actually that's being released today. Yeah.
So I'm very curious. I'm intrigued by this, and just to see the twists and turns mentally with this thing is amazing.
Yeah.
So that part of it, I guess that would be an entertaining factor. Actually,
well done. Yeah. So we're going to dive into how to work on generational trauma and curses in your families. Okay. But before we get started, I want to, really ask all of you, if you are interested in coaching, come talk to me, email me, call me. My number is on my website. Give me a call. I can work with you. No matter where you are. If you're interested in therapy, you got to be in the state of Illinois because I'm only licensed here. But reach out to me, okay? Come talk to me. I want to talk to you, and I want to see if we would be a good fit, all right? I think that sometimes I forget to be honest, to say that. And I want you to know that I'm inviting you to get to know me better. And if you're looking for someone for therapy, you're looking for coaching, let's see if I'm a good fit for you, because I think there is nothing like having a good therapist and coach in your life. I say this all the time on here. It's been game changing for me in my personal life and in my professional life. And I want you all to have the same. I want you to have the same services. Okay. So I just want to throw that in there. Please come talk to me. All right. I'm happy to help you. And if it's not me, I'll try to find someone who's for you. All right.
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
really important.
you can't understate the importance of a potential importance of a discovery call, right? Like you never really know. You just got to take that leap of faith sometimes. I mean, I have people that I have clients and we get on a discovery call, and sometimes I feel like that's the biggest hurdle we have to get over. And
Right.
then once you get beyond that, it's like, okay, all right, now I see where you're coming from. You see where I'm coming from. We know we are a good fit. We just need to figure out the scheduling.
Right.
But that first phone call, that's always the toughest part.
And I probably ought to say this. I mean, I work with mostly adults, but I started out in my private practice, geez, how many years ago? 4 years ago, with teenagers. So I don't see as many teenagers today, but I do. I do. I've done family therapy for years. I'm very comfortable working with families. I have coached families, couples. So, it's individuals, but also remember that I know how to talk to your teenager. I know how to talk to your kid. So if they're willing to talk to me, I want to talk to them. So that's something too, because I've got moms who come to me, mostly moms, sometimes dads, but they want also help for their kid. And I'm that different person. I'm the person I'm not your mom. I'm not their dad. I'm like the cool aunt. And that goes a long way with tweens and teens. I want to say that too. I mean, I will work with your teenager if they're willing and they want to work with me. They got to have some skin in the game. But if they got skin in the game, there's lots of good work that we can do together. So I want to say that too.
Nice.
All right. Okay, let's get going. So, the bear, there's the generational trauma that you see in the bear is alcoholism. It seems to be centered around alcoholism. And the mother is Jamie Lee Curtis, right? Isn't she the mother of Carmi and Sugar? And so the kids and the boy, I forget his name in the show, the one who he had just unalived himself and committed suicide several years before. And because that's what Carmi got the business. Right. So that really well done scene, I think Jamie Lee Curtis won an Emmy for it, was season. So I won't give it away, okay, if you haven't seen it, because you haven't seen it, you need to see it. If you have any interest in drama and family dynamics, it's just you don't even, okay, food, restaurants, people, you're going to like it. But there's a scene in season 2, episode 7, I think it's called Loaves and Fishes. It's a feast of loaves and fishes, and it's everybody's getting together. It's basically for a Christmas dinner. There's all kinds of cameos in there. John Mulaney, oh my gosh, Sarah Paulson. There's a lot of people in this episode. What's his name from SNL, the writer. Anyways, and she is, so I won't give it away, but it's about massive, massive anger, unresolved issues, stuff is coming up, people are drinking. It's just like, it's an explosion of family drama and unresolved trauma. The mom is hammered. You see the codependency coming out in the kids and trying to take care, trying to make it all better. You see addiction, you see so much. And it's interesting because I've been doing this work and I've worked in trauma for all these years. And in that episode, it was so intense. So for all of you listening, you're going to know what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen it, you're going to know. It was so intense. I got up off the couch and went and stood in the foyer. I watched the show from a distance. Right. It was so intense. It was almost like, whoa, 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 whoa. And it was so good, but I had a visceral, and I was talking with a client about it. It was actually a therapy client. And it was interesting because that person was watching the episode as well. And that person has come to me for lots of different things, but one of them is trying to heal the generational trauma and dysfunction of the people ahead of her. And she's trying to do it differently now with her children, with her family. And she said to me that her spouse got up and stood behind the couch too. And I'm like, that's how I was. And she's like, yeah, he really had a reaction too because of his family and his family stuff. And it triggered way big time something in him. So it was interesting for me to hear her say that, because I'm like, oh, I have the exact same kind of response. So all that to say, it's excellent, excellent show. And so all about generational trauma. And now we go to the monsters, the Menendez story. And that is about, there you go. It's almost like these curses that have gone down through these family lines. And this is about sexual abuse and molestation. And it just travels down. And if you don't deal with your issues, it just is going to hit the next generation. So people are continuing it, they're perpetuating it, they're going into this deep sense of denial and acting as if it didn't happen, it's not there, not looking at themselves, not doing the deep dive into, their own psychology. And then lo and behold, here it comes out, you act out the behaviors that were done to you onto the next generation down. And that's what really a lot of what Monsters is about, and why it can be hard to watch.
Yeah. And the part that gets me going is like, there's so many people around the edges of each of the generation that had an opportunity to change the course of history, right? Like they could change it, but they never did. Like no one ever spoke up. No one ever said anything. No one ever intervened. And there were so many people that had a shot at doing that.
It's like what you see is a repression of pain. It's unhealed pain. And what the individuals are doing is they're repressing it. They're pushing it down and living a life of denial as if it's not there. It's intense emotional baggage. And this, to me, the other week we did an episode on It's Not Always Trauma. This is trauma. This is big T trauma. This is post-traumatic stress disorder, trauma, and shame.
Yeah.
And shame can be so powerful. It lives in the dark, and we keep it in the dark because we don't even know how to start to deal with it. We don't know how to get it out. We don't have the words for it. We don't know how to articulate it. So it stays down in the dark. And shame lives in darkness. Shame can't live in the light. Shame doesn't like the light. So what we do is, maybe our parents, our grandparents, it's also, you have to remember the generations ahead of us, they weren't as psychologically savvy and open as we are today. Our parents, your and my parents, who were born in the 30s, maybe the 40s, they didn't talk about this stuff. I remember my grandmother saying, I was a teenager. I remember my grandmother saying, in my generation, we took those problems and we pushed them, we swept them underneath the rug, and that's where they stayed. I kind of couldn't believe she admitted that to me. But she was, of a different generation. And she's a British, in Irish origins, European. You didn't talk about that stuff. You didn't air your laundry to anybody outside your family. You didn't talk about the skeletons in your closet. People in the family, the immediate family knew, but you did not talk outside the family boundaries about what was going on. You didn't talk to anyone. Your friends, you didn't go to a counselor. There's no such thing as counseling, especially in yours and mine's, like Judeo-Christian, more conservative Christian. It was either go talk to the priest or go talk to the youth pastor or the youth counselor through church. But you didn't go to an air quote secular therapist, because they're just going to take you. I think they thought they were going to take us away from God or something. In my family, my parents, I think it just wasn't valued. It just, no one did it.
Yeah.
Right.
I think on my side, I think it probably was that. It probably was the fear or maybe the potential fear for this counselor, right? That's going to like look at it differently, right? Not from a religious,
which is exactly what needed to happen.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was like, it was like covertly, I was going to say, or overtly, we need to keep this dysfunction the way it is, because that's how we operate. We need to keep the dysfunction as is. So I've always said this to my clients. It's like when people are breaking generational curses or generational traumas, or breaking those bonds, because it's like a sick bond. But they are bonds, and they're strong. When I have a client who's working with me in therapy and I'm talking to him or her about breaking that curse, you know why it's so hard for them? Because now for the first time, they're going to be like the lone wolf crying out. And everyone's going to be like, shut up, shut the hell up. You don't do that. We don't talk that way. We don't talk about those things. You know the rules. You know how the system goes. You don't talk about those things. So when my clients do it, I always say it's like you guys have all been doing the jitterbug. You've all been doing this one dance in your family all these years, all these decades, all these generations. And now my client comes in and goes, I'm changing it up. I'm not doing the jitterbug anymore. I'm doing the cha-cha. Well, no one knows how to do the cha-cha. So the person that you're dancing with, let's say there's a bunch of you and you're coupled up and you're all doing this dance in a room. And then my client says, no, I want to do the cha-cha. And the person, your dance partner goes, what are you doing? We always do the jitterbug. I don't know how to do that dance. I'm not doing it. Yeah. So here you go. You're doing the cha-cha all by yourself. So everyone's still doing the jitterbug while you're doing the cha-cha. You're alone because no one knows how to do your dance and nobody wants to know how to do your dance.
It's probably more the second, right?
They don't want to know how to do that dance because we've been doing the jitterbug all these years, and that's how we operate. We're good. We're happy. Stop making a scene. That's exactly what it is. Yeah. So those clients, they need that supportive therapy. They need that support of, other people outside the family system to help them make those changes. That's how you start to break curses. Okay. It's also important when you really get into this work, as you're in it and as you spend time here and you kind of get more advanced in your healing, at some point you may be able to throw compassion to the people that what's going to happen is you may not be as close to because they can't break out of that generational bond that they're in. As traumatic and as dysfunctional as it may be, they may not know how to do it or be too afraid. There's a lot of fear to make changes.
Yeah.
Okay. So you see that in the Bear and you see that with the Menendez family. Looks like the father was molested. It looks like the sister, the dad, Jose, and it looks like you hear him at one point without giving this all away. It's just a small piece. You hear him on the phone talking to, I think his mother was molested. So this just went down through these generations, and it was like no one talked about it.
It's important to me that the supplements I take are of the highest quality, and that's why for 5 years I've been drinking AG1. Unlike many supplement brands, AG1 conducts relentless testing to set the standard for purity and potency. I know I can trust what's in every scoop of AG1 because it's tested for 950 contaminants and banned substances, while the industry standard typically only tests for 10. Taking care of my health shouldn't be complicated, and AG1 simplifies this by covering my nutritional basis and setting myself up for success in just 60 seconds. AG1's ingredients are heavily researched for efficacy and quality, and I love that every scoop also includes prebiotics, probiotics, and digestive enzymes for gut support. So if you want to replace your multivitamin and more, start with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3 plus K2 and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first subscription at drinkag1.com/Anna. That's drinkag1.com/Anna. Check it out. You will not regret it.
Pain travels through families until someone is willing to feel it. I love that quote. Pain travels through families until someone is willing to feel it. All right. So, oftentimes what we see, and I just said this, families will sublimate or avoid dealing with deep-rooted emotional pain. We'll do anything. We'll just play nice, make nice. Just everything's good. Everything's fine. Come on. Thanksgiving. Got to do the food. It's Christmas. It's Hanukkah. Come on. Let's all get together. Let's all have fun. Let's have a good time. We don't talk about those issues. I don't do that. No. We don't do that here. There's no time for that. And what are you talking about? That's not really a thing. Come on. That didn't really happen like that. They didn't really say that. That wasn't really done to you. Oh, you're making such a big deal out of it.
Yeah.
It's just denial. It's dismissiveness of you. It's disrespect of you. But that person does not know how to manage or handle what it is you're doing. So oftentimes we stay quiet, but what we do is we act out, and we see people acting out in ways, and I mean this in a good way, but acting out in ways of, it can manifest in depression. It can manifest in anxiety. It can manifest in sometimes like a bipolar disorder. Bipolar disorder is there's a biological component there. There's also a biological component to all of these, of course, right? But I think that you can be ripe for a mood disorder and ripe for a bipolar disorder when you take the externalities, the external factors of what's going on or not going on for you and your family. Okay. Does that make sense? You could have the wiring for a mood disorder or anxiety disorder, even a psychotic disorder. But if you've got all this kind of crazy dysfunctional stuff going on in your family, that can just set a person on the edge. And what oftentimes we see is somebody will air quote act out with a depression or anxiety, or there's anger, or they're irritable, they don't want to be around the family. They're the ones who are feeling what it is that nobody else will feel in the family. And they become like the black sheep or the shit disturber or the one making waves or causing problems or, oh God, what are they doing? They're being a pain in the butt again because they're feeling something that others don't want to feel.
Right.
Does that make sense?
So I'm thinking like that person has to have a moment of like come to Jesus with themselves, that they're gonna alter the course going forward, right? You're gonna have a moment of bravery to be that one person that's gonna try and stand up.
Well, oftentimes in the beginning, the person who's expressed the rebel, the person who's acting out, maybe they're partying, maybe they're not coming. Let's say let's take a teenager. You're partying a lot. You're not coming home when you're supposed to. You cause fights in the family. You cause arguments at the dinner table. You have a bad, air quote, bad attitude. You don't get out of bed when you're supposed to for school. You have a girlfriend or a boyfriend and you're just like, whatever. You don't text back. That can be somebody who is acting out, but until they've really done this work on themselves, usually it's in therapy, they don't know what they're doing. They just know how they feel and what they think, but they don't understand yet why they think the way they do, why they feel the way they do. They don't realize that they're acting out. It's not until like I'm doing the deep dive with them, but they're like, oh, yeah, okay. Because we're talking about their family of origin. We're talking about mom and dad. We're talking about siblings. We're talking about grandparents, aunts and uncles. I'm doing what we call a genogram. I'm doing their history of their family. And I'm asking them questions in such a way is to have them thinking about what's this about for me? What is really going on? It's not about you being in a bad mood and being a pain in the butt, a brat at the dinner table, bugging your sister, bullying your sister, or being disrespectful to your father or coming in drunk at night, past curfew. What's really going on? And when they take the time with psychological safety and I've given the oxygen and the emotional space to do that work and they're quiet enough, lo and behold, what's inside starts to come out. And then more than me, they start to see, oh, okay, this is what's coming up for me. Because
and then what to do with that.
Right. And that's what I said. And I went ahead a little bit talking about how they start doing a different dance.
Yeah.
And there are sometimes people in families, I have a client, and let's say I have it could be any age, actually. It could be a teenager, it could be any age. I've had people in the 40s and 50s do this work. It's a little bit easier because at that point, many of them have left their family of origin, right? But they may be continuing it with their own spouse and their own kids,
That's the worry.
Right.
Yeah.
So they can start to make changes in their now new immediate family. Sometimes, and part of that work is talking to their adult siblings, maybe talking to their parents. Many times parents don't want to hear it. They're like, nope, don't want to hear it because that's another, like I said earlier, that's another generation. That's baby boomers. And who are before the baby boomers? Our parents are before baby boomers. Our parents are, the silent generation? Well, people born in the 30s and 40s are like before World War II and World War II. Now, many of those people now, they're 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
It's probably more as the baby boomers now. But they're like, yeah, no, we're not talking about that. I see that mostly. Every now and then you get, grandmother or great grandmother who is progressive and would be willing to hear that and hear what it is that I did affected you. It's very hard to hear. It is hard to hear. So I don't see it often at all. It's a rare thing. I talked about the study that they did at Ohio State many years ago about talking with your parents and grandparents about basically generational trauma and what they had done to cause the problems in the adult son or daughter's life. And I think 8 out of 10 of the parents who are interviewed were total denial and actually would not hear of or take any accountability or responsibility for their part in their adult child's feelings, issues, present day, they would not be called down. They just would shut it down.
That's
So there you
interesting.
go. Yeah, that's a hard one. But you don't have to have them. You can do that if you want, but you certainly can do this work without ever having talked to them. You don't ever need to speak to them. Right. You could heal and really move into post-traumatic growth from doing this work with a therapist.
Right.
If you want to add that in, and sometimes I will, support that. Most times with my clients, we don't need to do that work. But if they say, Anna, there's no way that my 75, 80-year-old dad is going to listen to me. There's no way.
At least not on this one.
So you don't need so
Yeah.
you don't need to do that.
Yeah.
You can do this on your own.
Yeah.
But that may mean creating boundaries around these people ahead of you who want to perpetuate the trauma, perpetuate, the old kind of sick dynamic that you were raised in.
And I'm just thinking this can become very complex too, because we're talking about your parents potentially as a unit, but that wasn't always the case. Like each of them came from very different backgrounds,
right?
Influenced by potentially very different backgrounds.
And we have to also remember your grandparents or your great grandparents. Now, many of you are not talking to your great grandparents. You may not even be talking to your grandparents, but your parents, many of them lack the emotional tools, and it is a set of tools to even be able to hear what it is you're saying to them. Many of them have not been in therapy, have never been in therapy, and they don't have the emotional, they really don't have the bandwidth because they don't have the tools. Today, I love it. Mental health has come a long way. The stigma's gone down. Many people on therapy. 20 years ago, nobody wanted to talk about the fact that they're seeing a therapist. My therapist's name is Anna. Today, it's like, oh, how'd your session go with Anna? What'd you guys talk about? Although my clients don't have to tell anybody because it's confidential. But it's like, it's commonplace for me to have my therapy clients. They're like, oh, you're a household name. We talk about you all the time, Anna, and what you said. I love that because we've come such a long way.
Right.
But do remember that the people ahead of us, and some people are also just not psychologically savvy, or they don't value psychology and they're not interested in it and they don't care. And they want to keep it surface and they do not want to talk about these issues. Like, la, 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 we're not talking about that.
Right.
Bye, leave.
And that's where we're from, right? That's how we grew up in that world, in that mindset.
Yeah. You more than me, I think. Yeah.
It's interesting.
You more than me. My family's a little bit more open and we'll talk about these things freely with each other. I think with my siblings, we have helped each other heal. We have talked about some very serious things that have happened in our childhoods. Some of it came out around the illness and the death of my father. It's almost like it freed us up in some ways to talk about traumas that we experienced when we were young, small T traumas, and they affected us. But I think just by listening to one another and not denying each other, because I don't remember, because I'm number 6, so my siblings are 2 years ahead of me, then 5, then 7, and then 8 years ahead of me. My brother was 8 when I was born. I have no idea what it was like when he was 16. I was 8 years old.
Yeah,
that's
not your story.
It's a totally different. Well, all of us we're a different family. I have no memories of their memories, and they will talk about things that I think we've helped each other heal, because sometimes it's just listening without judgment, without having an opinion, and just listening. Going, oh wow, I didn't know that happened. That sucks. That alone, and just really showing empathy, that alone can be really healing for people.
Right.
Yeah, I think your family's a little different. Where you come from is even more like this. Nobody really wants to talk about, the elephant in the room. There's a big, huge elephant in the family room, and everybody just keeps like stepping over its foot, but we're just going to pretend it's not there. Unfortunately, a lot of families are this way. Like, we're not talking about that elephant in the room.
No, and that makes it difficult or makes it more challenging for like our generation now, like me, like, with you, it's like we've got that as the past, and there's some unresolved things, right? And it's like you want, but like you said before, that generation might not want to talk about that.
Right? Well, and I think that you come to a point where, so now we're getting back into boundaries. You with the help of sometimes this can be a coach. You work on establishing your own boundaries. And now, what are my new boundaries with my family of origin? Because if they're not going to listen, well, number one, do you need them to help you heal? And if you need them to help you heal, then there's a boundary around that. Many times, like I just said, you don't need them to help you heal. So, but you've tried to talk to them about this and they have dismissed you and gotten mad at you. You have to decide for yourself what kind of relationship you want to have with maybe your mom and dad. Maybe, it's surfacey. It's always been surfacey. That's the way they want to keep it. I've tried to talk to them about these things. They're just not having it. So we'll keep it surfacey and I'll get my needs met elsewhere in my life. It's not going to be with them. It never really was with them. And I don't even know why I'm trying to get it with them. They're not providing it. They're not going to give it to me. I got to give it to myself, number one. And then I can get it from others in my life, like my spouse now and my friends now, and maybe my adult siblings now. It's not going to be them. So that's really important.
Yeah.
So I think that moving on, we're talking about you and I in some ways, well, in many ways, we're the cycle breakers. So think about if you want to be the cycle breaker in your life, if this is something that I've talked about so far in this episode resonates for you, think about breaking that cycle and how can you do it? The cycle breakers need to be brave enough to feel the pain and to work on it. And most cycle breakers are in therapy getting help to do it because it's a hard road and it's so worth it to walk down that road. You need help because it can feel very isolating and alone, especially if you're being yelled at or talked at from, maybe someone in your family who sees what you're doing is like, be quiet. Stop talking about that. Like, can you just stop? Shh, enough, then you need to find people in your life because, what happens is if you don't have support, you're going to feel isolated. You're going to feel misunderstood about what you're trying to say in the family about this, this is what happened. This is you can use all the best I statements and talk about your feelings and people can still shut you down. So then you're like, I'm being misunderstood. Like, why is it being distorted in this way? Why can't they just hear me? Because they're defensive. You're threatening them. You're threatening their system of operating. So that's why you got to get help. But still be that cycle breaker. You got to have those boundaries up. So maybe, you're not, for each person, it's different. Maybe, you're not visiting as much, or maybe you're visiting as much as you were, but you're not staying as long, or you're actively avoiding conversations that may get into something that are going to upset you, or you just be very mindful of your triggers. And if something comes up, like, I'm out, I'm going to go, or I'm going to hang up the phone now, or else not usually happening on text, but it's usually live.
I'm sure for people, I was in a different spot with this, but I think the theme is the same.
Yeah.
And I think it's also important to remember, so you're the brave one, that you stand up, you rise up, you're going to do the work, you're going to try and break the cycle, but it's also the people that come after you potentially are going to benefit from this.
Yeah.
Right. You might not really have a chance to see the benefits of it as much as, let's say, the generation after you.
Yeah.
That gets completely swayed into a different direction because of what you did. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, I want you, the listener, to really think about this and to think about this could be a really interesting exercise for you. Maybe you've done this before. If you've done it before, do it again. Or maybe this is your first time. Spend some time thinking about your role in your family growing up. What's your role? Who were you? What kid are you? Are you an only child? Are you the middle child? Are you the youngest? Were you in a small family? Are you in a big family? Think about your role. Were you the golden child? Were you the black sheep? Were you the shit disturber? Were you the baby? Were you indulged? Were your parents strict with you? Were they, very, permissive with you? Did you get your way a lot? Did you not? What were the values you were raised with? What values? Religious, spiritual, or they don't have to be religious, just values. What did your family value? And do you have those values today? You can start to really think about, what was my role growing up? And I also really encourage you to think about, who were you? Were you the one who did you cause problems? Sometimes we're the one who we actually supported this family dysfunction. We may be the one who I didn't want things to be different. I knew it was kind of effed up, but that's how our family was and kind of still is. And hey, it's not great. And I kind of know that, but I'll admit, I don't know if I want it to change. And I sometimes do still contribute to the family dysfunction because, Sunday nights, everybody does drink a lot. And yeah, there might be some addiction in my family, but I like to drink too. And I can, tease her until she cries. And we've been together since she was like 8 years old. And
Yeah.
I don't mean,
That might
there you
be
go.
the path of least resistance, right? It was to kind of be complacent and just
Yeah,
go.
that's a role.
Yeah.
The complacent one. Do you
Yeah.
see all that's going on? Have you seen all that went on in your family when you were growing up? And if you were a child, there may have been nothing you could do. But do you see it now as an adult and do you still stay quiet? So are you complicit? Your silence is your complicity. So I'm challenging you on this. This is some really good work. And I think it's work that personally, I think all of us need to be doing. So look at your role. Maybe you contributed to it. Maybe you're saying, yeah, I did. And that's okay. Don't judge yourself. Maybe you need to forgive yourself, throw yourself compassion, and think about how you're going to make changes. Think about how now you're going to be the one to break the cycle. And maybe you're not going to be able to do it in your family of origin because you're 35 years old and you've got your own family now. Do it differently with your spouse, with your life partner, with your kids if you haven't.
So I think that could be a tremendous exercise also, right? So if you come from, can we use you as an example? You're one of 8, right? Not all of your siblings have children, but many of them do, right? And so, like you said before, every one of you is the 8 original children have a different story from the others.
Do, right.
So is it a pattern that you could, like, from the outside look at? Let's take one of your siblings and look at their children. Like, is there something that you guys, maybe you don't know because you were young at the time, but maybe something that sibling went through with your parents, with your aunts, uncles, grandparents, whatever it is, and now that has kind of taken on a kind of a mind of its own and has been passed down to that siblings' children.
Oh, I absolutely see it.
Right? Like that would be,
see it. And
I think that would be an
interesting
interesting exercise.
I see the work that's been done and the work that has not been done from a psychological, emotional level.
Yeah.
I see the unresolved issues and I see how it's been passed down to nephews and nieces in a good way and not a good way.
Yeah,
but
this doesn't have to be in a bad way.
I do see it though.
Yeah,
I do see it. It's not, I don't say anything because it's not my place to say.
Sure.
And I have to really be careful and watch my own boundaries because it's not my family. I try to keep my nose to the grindstone of you and I and our 5 children, but I'm a therapist. I mean, I see these things. I see it, I think, differently than other family members. There's other people in the similar field as me in the family, but we see it differently. And I think that, I have one sibling who's very psychologically savvy. That person sees it too, but it's not our place to say, it's not my place to talk to my sibling about what I see. I don't think it's appropriate. I'm not around that much. They don't live in the same city as me. But yet, to your point, I do see it. And I think to myself, the only thing I would maybe say is, and this is for anybody listening that's following along with this, get your own therapy. Do your best to try to work on your stuff. I mean, when I talk about trauma, when I speak to groups, and I talk about triggers, and we can get triggered in the workplace, and some unresolved or resolved trauma can come up. Something at work can trigger us about something that we dealt with in the past, and people have said to me, I dealt with this. Why is this coming up? Because you can be through it and you can be mostly healed. It doesn't mean that you're living your life now in 2024. Something happens at work, or your spouse said something, you get in a fight or tiff with each other, and a little bit of that old scab comes off, and you're kind of laid bare, a little bit raw again. And it's like, geez, I'm like totally reacting to what he or she said to me because I'm so mad. Well, what is it really about? Well, because that's not the same thing I heard when I was a kid. Okay. So look at that, and that's what I think is really important, that we can spend a lifetime doing that. And that it doesn't mean you're going to go through and you need to do trauma work again and you need to do, 2 years in therapy. It just means you could be going through something and you can get triggered again, and just know what that is for you. I think that, for those who haven't really spent a lot of time in therapy, they're not doing that work because they don't know to do the work. And maybe they're just afraid right now. So I would encourage, it's okay to be afraid. What's the worst that's going to happen? It's okay to be afraid. Still move forward towards it. Get the therapy that you need. There are people out there who are wonderful at this. and it really supports you. It can ask questions from another viewpoint and really help you kind of go in underneath like the hood of your life and help you kind of unearth some issues and deconstruct. And you have no idea the liberation that's on the other side of that for you and the healing that's on the other side of that for you. It's such a wonderful feeling. It's a great place to be.
Yeah.
But I wanted to talk about this because we're watching the monsters, or we're watching The Bear, and I'm like, oh, these are two great shows, and we're looking at generational curses and traumas that are passed down from family members who are not looking at their stuff. Now, in The Bear, I think Sugar and Carmi, I think they go to Al-Anon, which is great. I love 12-step, recommend it all day long. But we don't really see in these two shows that they're really doing this therapy. Oh, well, the Menendez boys were, but they had this crazy, I'm sorry, therapist, and you'll watch the show. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about if you're watching the show. Yeah. Somebody, like I say, not all therapists are the same. Some are really wonderful. Some are, I wouldn't even send my dog to. I love my dogs, but I wasn't my dog too. No. So, but it just brought up this inside of me that I thought I got to talk about this because I haven't mentioned this on the podcast before. It's very common to have issues that run down through the generations. You can be the cycle breaker. You can do it different for yourself, for peace and contentment in your life, and you can do it for your family now. And maybe your family N of one, it's you. Do it for you. That's what's most important.
That's good advice.
All right. Okay, everyone. Subscribe, rate, and review the podcast, please. The 5 stars makes all the difference in the world. And don't hesitate to reach out to me. Like I said in the beginning of this episode, come talk to me. All right. I'm here. Mad love.